Hello and welcome, I'm Kira Scribner, and today I have Ruth Marie Paterson with me.
I'm a writer and a poet, and Kirsten and I have been friends for maybe 5 years or so. We went to college together, and we just love talking about bookish things.
She published this beautiful book. It's called Gently Planted, and it is her first collection of poetry that is really, really beautiful. And from the beginning, you can kind of tell, like, I walked in and I was like, oh, it's my friend. And then I read the first page and I was like, well, it's not just my friend, it's a really good writer.
Aw, thank you. That is so sweet.
And that's why I read it usual thought, because it's just so pretty. And also deep and contemplative and all of those things.
Well, thank you.
What made you first want to write and create stories?
So I think growing up, I was a very quiet girl, shy. And for me, writing was just a way to express my thoughts and be creative, but without that risk, I guess, of being vulnerable with another person or of being, I had social anxiety, so I didn't want to talk with people, but writing was an outlet for me.
Just make them in your own head and then
exactly, and then it's fine. So that's where it started, and as I got older, it just became, I got more brave in sharing my writing, and it became a way then of how can I impact other people and share my art with other people and hopefully enrich their lives a bit as well. So
nice. Do you remember the first cringy story or narrative nonfiction or whatever you wrote?
So I think the first story I tried to write, me and my sisters would write prairie stories.
Nice. Like Little House on the Prairie?
Little House on the Prairie type stories. And our characters were always named Sarah or something like that.
Like your sister's name?
Yeah, my sister's name. And lived on a farm. That was the type of story that I started out trying to write.
That is also the stories that I started writing.
We were homeschooled.
Homeschooled girls with all the Amish fiction. I just remember being 12 years old and going into my basement and trying to find a fiction book, and I was like, I need to know what a man thinks about romance. And I found a Jeanette Oat book that was from a 15-year-old boy, and I was like, now I understand what boys, because the 70-year-old woman is writing about a boy in 1810, and that's how I understand how boys think.
I'm sure it's accurate.
I think it's completely accurate. Where do you get your ideas from?
I don't know. I've heard described many times that ideas kind of sometimes seem like they're given to you, like they're outside of yourself, and if you're just quiet and open yourself to it, the ideas come. So honestly, I think writing is like that for a lot of people and for me as well. Yes. I can't always say where they come from, they just do.
How has your writing changed between Gently Planted and Sharp Edges, the book that is coming out in the spring?
So my first book, Gently Planted, it was written at a very pivotal time in my life. So I had just graduated college, I had moved into my first apartment, and I had started dating the man who I am now married to. So there was just a lot of life changes, and the book is really about growing pains and just growing up and reflecting on your past and knowing how to move forward. So that was the themes of the first book. And then Sharp Edges, my second book that's coming out in February. It's similar themes, but taking it on a darker twist, and it kind of talks about how people have sharp edges. So Henry David Thoreau said, truths and roses have thorns about them.
I like that.
And that's kind of the guiding theme of the book, is that everything good has its rough edges, has its hard things, and to get to the good, you have to have the bad as well. So that's what Sharp Edges is about.
I'm so excited to read it.
Oh, thank you.
What poets first inspired you? What was the transition from writing narrative nonfiction to writing poetry? Because when I first met her, she was like, I'm going to write this beautiful narrative nonfiction. And I was like, wow, I'm just writing fantasy books and trying to deal with that. You can't imagine writing something real. And then we both kind of transitioned to poetry at the same time.
Yeah, around the same time and around the same way. I know it's so basic, but both of us had a similar awakening to poetry, which was reading Ruth Picard.
Yeah.
And I think she was such a widespread poet, and from the area where we lived as well. We just saw her poems and realized it was simple enough that we felt like we can do this too, but also beautiful enough that we just realized, oh, poetry can be emotional, it can be modern, it can be relevant to our day and age. I grew up liking poetry. I just didn't try writing it very much.
It sounded too complicated to actually understand.
Too complicated, too complex. I felt like it was pretentious to be a poet.
I was like, I don't like nature that much. And now I'm like, ooh, nature.
I know, right? I love T.S. Eliot now. T.S. Eliot is my favorite poet. He's so inspiring. His word pictures are so rich and his characters are amazing. So read T.S. Eliot.
So in this poem, you have one about like writing like Autumn, and she's very, very good at writing like beautiful nature things.
Mm-hmm.
You went from it being pretentious to like making it very relatable and very beautiful. And like, where do you get that inspiration of? Like, how do you like write about nature and like use metaphors and stuff like that?
I read a lot of Mary Oliver, who is, you know, the perfect person who writes about nature in my mind, and Robert Frost as well writes about nature very well. Many poets do. And it's kind of interesting because I'm not, my husband always teases me about I'm not very an observant person. And it's kind of a joke because I don't always notice things that are right in front of my face.
Yeah.
And same with nature. I couldn't tell you what kind of flower I'm looking at, what kind of tree I'm looking at, whatever. But the theme of my book, Gently Planted, because it was about growing up, it just evoked themes of things that grow around in the world around us, and of springtime and changing of seasons and such. So that kind of, it just came about because of that.
What is your schedule like, and how do you deal when you get like writer's block, or you feel anxiety or stress, or just don't have any ideas? Like, what do you do then?
If I'm stressed about writing, I try and remember that there's many more things in the world to be stressed about, and we're very lucky to be writers. Yeah. So I try and take it less seriously, which is a challenge for me. I'm a serious person, and so sometimes I just need to write whatever's at the top of my mind and just get words on the page. And I call it like a palate cleanser. You just write whatever's on your mind, and that can get some words flowing. So it's not as stressful, and you're not afraid of being a perfectionist and having to write the perfect sentence, right?
I struggle with that so badly.
Yeah, me too. Perfectionism makes it hard to write a lot of times.
That's actually something that I admired about you. Right before you published, we were on a video call because it was mid-COVID, and you were talking about the fact that like this might not be your best work, but you wanted to publish it. And I just was like, that's life-changing, because as someone who's always is like, is this my best work? Is this where I want to start? The like humility and calmness of you to be like, maybe this isn't my best work, but I want to start here. And also, it's really good writing. So there's nothing to be like, you know, you started with your not best work, which, because we will all get better as we write and mature and stuff like that. But I loved that in you, that you were willing to say that and do that.
I got that from, I can't remember the artist, but someone said the records they make now, they couldn't have made 20 years ago. Yeah. But the music they made 20 years ago is so loved by fans, and you just have to start putting things out there to get to that record or that poem or that book that you're very proud of. I think you should be proud of anything on the way as well. But
you made me think of Taylor Swift. We both love Taylor Swift, and I was thinking about the fact that like so often her music, like her beginning music, is so raw and so straightforward, and her music now is still that, but she's able to like tell other people's stories, and she's able to weave themes a lot better now. But she started with that like raw personal poetry, and how it's pretty much poetry, and how it advanced throughout the times. So we all just want to be Taylor Swift.
Yes, she's a great poet also.
What is the hardest thing about writing? And then on the other hand, what is like the funnest, most exciting, or easiest thing?
I think the hardest thing about writing is knowing that it's difficult to make money with it, which we've talked about.
Let's go realistic.
Yeah. Which means it's difficult sometimes to see it as a discipline and to make time for it if you know that you're not going to be getting paid for that time. Yeah. So getting over that roadblock, as far as the craft of writing goes, I'm still not good at fiction. So I'm working at learning fiction because I want to learn fiction. But yeah. And easiest for me would be that narrative nonfiction, or just writing a thought piece as opposed to an imagery piece. I
just have a collection of essays.
Yeah, I should. Sometimes.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So the last question is, what is a piece of advice your younger self you would like to give your younger self? And then what piece would you like your older self to give? Like, what advice do you feel like you need now?
I think my younger self, I would have said, like, start being adventurous sooner. Put yourself out there sooner. Start writing what you really want to write sooner. I got there eventually though, so it's not a big regret, but I always think, you know, if you could just start writing and not get in your own way. Yeah. You know, that would be
that. I wish I'd like read past what I was comfortable with when I was younger.
And then the advice for now, that's hard because I think in hindsight I would know what advice I would want to give to
What do
myself.
You feel like you need encouragement most?
Yeah. I think in being brave in what I write again as well, because I'm trying to learn fiction when I haven't learned it much before, just like being okay with having a story that is cliche and a story that might not be publishable, but still writing it so I can get to the point when I can write a
Well, I
good
think you
cliche.
sometimes need to write the cliches to be able to make something that's not. I also think that sometimes cliches can be done really, really well, and they're beautiful, and you don't always have to be out of the box to be special or to be unique.
People like the classics and the cliches for a reason.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and to just chat and have me at her house with her beautiful books. It is really gorgeous, and I don't know if you can tell, there's like little fairy lights and stuff, so this is like the most beautiful. I walked in and I was like, this is like the manor house that I want with all of the bookshelves one day. Where can people find Gently Planted, and when you put out Sharp Edges, and like your Instagram, your YouTube channel, let everyone know.
You can buy Gently Planted anywhere where books are sold, on Amazon or wherever. You can find me on YouTube at The Rainy Day Poet, Instagram at Ruth Marie Paterson.
And also we filmed a book tag about a classic book tags of our favorite classics, and I was talking back and forth on her channel, so I will also leave that linked below.
Check it out!
See you guys next time.